when that same servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii and seized him. He began to choke him, saying, "Pay me what you owe me." So what we have is Bob was just forgiven a $60 million debt. And now somebody owes him 100 denarii, which is 100 days worth of work. So we could equate it to $1. Well, that's not really a good equation, sorry. So what I want you to do is think about the guy earns $1 a day for his wage. That's what a denarii was in the culture. A free man would earn $1 a day working. So it's about 3 months' salary for him. So you got Bob, who is forgiven $60 million, comes out, goes MMA style on Chad for $100. If you want to get the numbers down just a little bit more, it would be a $600,000 debt for one polar pop. So basically we have a $600,000 debt, and he's beating up a guy for $1. In Kingman, the average house is about $100,000. Market's gone up a little bit. So he could have had 6 houses for what he owes and was forgiven. And the guy he's mad at is owing him $1. Apparently that was a bad reference too. Alright, we're gonna have to work on those. Okay. So let's notice what Chad says to Bob. And his fellow servant fell down and pleaded with him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you." Does that sound familiar?
Yep.
Should look just like verse 24, 26. So have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. And so Bob, in his anger, he doesn't even identify that the same words that the person who owes him money, he spoke to the master trying to get out of. So let's see what happens with Bob. Bob's like, I'm not going to listen to you. He refused and went and put him in prison until he should pay his debt. So, forgiven $60 million, now owes him $100, or about 3 months' wages. So, let's say you are a credit card spender. I know I don't have any in the room, but let's just say you're a credit card spender. And you rack up 3 months worth of your salary. How long does that take you to pay off? If you're Dave Ramsey,
10 years.
10 years. There's our minimum payment guy. But that's an affordable amount. You can figure out how to work out a deal to get that paid, right? The $60 million, we're not paying. The other thing that we talked a little bit about, was you went to debtor's prison, or you could be sold as a slave. So when I first read this, I was like, oh, that'll work out fine. Bob will get his money, and then Chad will end up with 400 denarii, will end up with some money in his pocket because he's sold as a slave, but it doesn't work that way. In the Roman times, you could only be sold for what your debt was. And to give you the perspective about payment for a slave, it is, the average guy went for about 500 denarii, or $500. And if you were super special, you could go for 1 talent. So if we looked at Bob in the beginning, when his whole family was being sold off, when the master said, I'm going to sell everything, he's not looking at getting back more than maybe 1% of what he was owed. And here, this guy's going to go to prison, to debtor's prison, for less than what a slave cost. So if we look at that, does Bob have a forgiving heart?
No.
No. I think of it like my kids, when you're like, say you're sorry, and they whip those words out, like, oh, thank you. I'm so sorry, Dad. And then you ask him 5 minutes later, hey, what were you sorry for? Ooh. So that's kind of how I picture Bob's walking out the door. And in here, I couldn't find the Greek on it, but he found his fellow servant. It wasn't he walked into his fellow servant, wasn't at dinner, another guy walked in. It seems like he's pretty intentionally went out to find the guy who owed him money. Now, what I want to say real quick is that this passage, you can't interpret it as don't collect what you're owed. If somebody owes you money, they owe you that money by all accounts. You should get your money. But if somebody just gave you a new car and you have a 98 Toyota Camry sitting in the parking lot and somebody's like, hey, I really need a new car, how obligated should you feel? Should you like go, well, that car's worth at least $500. Should I really, can I compare that to my brand new SUV that just showed up in the parking lot for free?
I'd sure like to try.
Yeah.
If you can tell me where to sign up.
So you really can't compare the two. But, so that's kind of what we're talking about is where's your heart at? That's what this passage really talks about. You are forgiven if you're in Christ. Are you forgiving to other people? As we go on, verse 31, when his fellow servants saw what had taken place, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their master all that had taken place. For me, I wanted to go on and on. This was like the text I really wanted to dig into. But the two commentators I read, David Turner, he just kind of passed over it. Said, hey, it just goes away. And the NIV application, I read their commentary, and they kind of passed on it too. And I was like, but wait, this is an important point. Nobody likes to see injustice. I mean, other people can identify our witness by what we've done. And then I looked at it a little bit more, and really, that phrase just helps the story go along. Because if we've made the king God, and we've made Bob a Christian brother, like you and I, do we not think God knows what Bob did? Do we not think that God knew before Bob did what he was going to do? So I think this sentence right here just kind of helps the story flow in on a very earthly level. Then the masters summoned Bob and said to him, "You wicked servant, I forgave all your debt because you pleaded with me. And should you not have had mercy on your fellow servants as I've had mercy on you?" This is where the parable gets ugly. I know none of you have read ahead to the next verse. But if you have, you see where this parable is going to go. And it took me back. I was like, but wait, all we preach is a God of mercy. There's no judgment. He loves us. And how can God do this? And now that I've built it up, it greatly, here's what he did.
It's counting up.
And should not you have had mercy on your fellow servants as I had mercy on you? And in his anger, the master delivered him to the jailer until he should pay all his debt. What just happened? In our parable, God just sent somebody to jail. Is that a forgiving God? No. He forgave, and his forgiveness was rejected. And now we see his righteousness, because it's a God of righteousness. He doesn't let sin go unpunished. So Bob, having received forgiveness, didn't carry through what his forgiveness should have produced. So as a Christian, we are forgiven. And then all of a sudden down here, guess what? We should be changed. So God forgave us. We should be forgiving others. And you said, Joel, but you said parables don't make theology. And I said, you're right. I'm glad you guys noticed that. So that's why we're going to look at Luke 6:37 to 38. Again, that's Luke 6:30. We'll start at 36 and go to 38. And what we're going to talk about here is some crazy verses. And we'll start right here at 36. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. In good measure, pressed, shaken down together, running over, will be put to your lips. For with the measure you use, it will also be measured back to you. And I am stealing this verse and the next little section straight from Larry Osborne. He's a pastor at the North Coast Church. You can Google him. It's an awesome sermon. You podcast him. He does this much better than I do, but I'm just going to take just a little bit of what he did.